Hey everybody, welcome to What's the Plan with Leah and Ezra. We're going to get started. We'll give people just a minute to join up. We've got a lot of folks, a lot of questions. Excited to be here. Thank you for your emojis. If you could, we've got L. Martinek. You beat everybody else with Scottsdale, Arizona here. Let us know where you're coming from. If you're in an Indivisible group, let us advertise your new Indivisible group or your old Indivisible group, the Indivisible group that you're organizing with. If you're organizing by yourself or with another group, that's welcome too. Look, we're all coming from different places. We're all organizing for democracy. We're going towards about 3,000 to 2,500 people on the call. And this part of the call. If you're brand new here, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to organize with everybody. A lot of heart emojis. This is how we always start out. Lee and I, for folks who don't know, we are married. We are in the same room together because of that and sitting very close and kind of squunched in here. Don't worry about the guitar. It's a Telecaster. It won't go out of tune even if we run right into it. So it's great. Someday, maybe we'll do a concert, Leah.
We will not do that.
We will not do that.
Okay.
Leah promises not. We've got Boston. We've got New Rochelle. We've got Maryland. We've got Oregon. We've got Wisconsin. Oh, big win in Wisconsin that we'll talk about. We've got Concord, Mass. We've got David from Poland. Everywhere. Oh, this is a bit.
It's going too fast.
It is going too fast. So we've got a lot to cover. We got a ton of questions. Leah, I say we get
Let's
into
get
it.
in.
Okay. Well, welcome new people. Welcome everybody. I've been saying this for a few weeks, and I get to keep on saying this, that you are joining, if you're brand new here, at a time of mass movement growth, and we need you. That is what we need in this movement. There has never been a time that we know of where we have confronted creeping authoritarianism successfully with anything other than a massive, broad-based organizing movement of people from all walks of life. If you're here, great, welcome. We need you. You are part of this fight for our constitutional republic. And we are here not just to talk about how we're all in this fight together, but to talk about what we can do together. So this is an action-oriented group, and we want to talk about the specific actions that we can take together, and excited to be doing it. Just a note, we started doing this a few weeks ago, and I really like this part. As I mentioned, this is a accelerating movement. In the last week, we've had, I counted them up, 71 new local Indivisible groups. Again, if you're not familiar with Indivisible, our unit of activism is the local group. Obviously, they're made up of individuals who are giving their time and energy to lead on the ground, but we form local Indivisible groups, volunteer, independent groups that apply and build and wield their power to push their elected officials to show up in person with each other in nonviolent, peaceful ways and change what is politically possible at the national level. That's what we do. So I want to call out a few groups from blue, red, and purple areas. We got Elkhart County Indivisible in Goshen, Indiana. If y'all are on the call, welcome. Brand new Indivisible group in the last week. Y'all are between South Bend and Fort Wayne. Will note, I've been out to Indivisible Indiana events a few times. There's a very strong network in Indiana. One of the fun parts of going through this list every week, too, is I get to educate myself on the geography. So I'm learning a lot about where everybody's from. Miami-Dade Indivisible, brand new in the last week. Famously, Miami-Dade. I think that was my first major political memory, if I'm dating myself, 25 years ago. In the 2000 election, Miami-Dade played an important role. It will play an important role in the future. Great to have you here. I love this one. Indivisible Bitterroot in Hamilton, Montana. That's about an hour south of Missoula. Great to have you. A lot of love for Missoula out there. Indivisible Manassas in Virginia, brand new. Just started this year, and that's a good thing because there's a big election in Virginia coming up in just a few months. Indivisible Lake Martin in Dadeville, Alabama. This is just about an hour north of Montgomery. We spend a fair amount of time in Alabama because Leah's family is from out there. And yeah, I think Alabama is a really beautiful state. If you get a chance to drive through, I'd recommend it. Indivisible Crosstown in Bloomington, Minnesota. Lee and I both went to college, undergrad, just south of the Twin Cities. Funny story. We were here in an event recently in Minnesota. Tim Walz was there, and he came up to the table of all the Indivisibles, and he said, "Indivisibles, y'all are everywhere." This is great. We love Tim Walz. We love Tim Walz, and he loves Indivisible. Indivisible Spicewood, Texas. I'm from Buda, Texas, so just south of Austin. Spicewood's just a little bit north from Austin. It's great to see some Texans joining up. Great to have you. And we do have a new international group. We have Indivisible Paris, France. just joined up this week. This is a global movement, y'all. I mean, predominantly we're in about 1,700 communities all across the country, but we're also international. We're seeing people join in Dublin and people join in Ottawa and people join in Europe. You know what turns out? Folks all around the world, they don't like fascism. They don't like what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the congressional Republicans are doing, not just our country, the rest of the world, and they're looking for ways to organize, and we're here for it. We're here for it, y'all. This is what this is about. So with that celebration
Okay.
said, Leah, do you want to cover why we do these calls? And let's try to move forward to a few topics before we get to Q&A.
Oh yeah, okay. All right. So quick housekeeping. This is gonna be Q&A after we get done with our opening comments. Mostly live. Some are gonna be submitted in advance. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the toolbar on your Zoom. We're going to be taking questions from there. So if you put something in the chat that's not gonna work quite as well as just putting it in the place where it's supposed to go. We also upvote questions. So if you see questions that you want us to answer, hit that upvote so that we can answer the most popular questions and get to what's on people's minds. We're gonna post links in the chat as we go for any resources that we're talking about, for links or for events, for information. So, and we will also follow up with them in the follow-up email if you missed them in the chat. This will be recorded. It will be sent out to everyone who registered and posted on our YouTube page. And let's see. Respect. So just a reminder, we're going to talk about heavy stuff here. It is intense. It is really personal. Folks' lives and well-being are on the line right now. It is natural for that to be very emotional. We ask that people try to keep the chat constructive, collaborative, supportive. We are all in this together. We're all going to fight back together. That's how we're going to make it through.
And I noted this in the last call. I gave a big welcome to all the new Indivisible groups. I would also welcome to the MAGA infiltrators who are out there and watching us. They have been joining these, have been posting publicly that, oh my gosh, they're talking about how they're organizing to push Republicans.
We're
That's
sending the
right.
links.
That's right. We post this publicly. We discuss our strategies publicly. This is a publicly built, nonviolent, peaceful movement to actually fight for our democracy. And anytime some forma MAGA wants to join our ranks and recognize that Donald Trump is not just hurting the country, but he's hurting you and your family and your schools and your community, you're welcome. You're welcome in this movement. And if you want to post us to your right-wing chats, that's cool too. It's open to everybody. Okay, one thing that I want to note on that, we try to do a survey just about every week after these calls, and we did one that was kind of a vibe check after the last week. And as you can imagine, for folks who joined these calls, when I asked how engaged are you, how much are you leaning back, folks on this call are generally engaged. We got very few people responding to that survey saying, "Oh, I'm checked out, I'm not paying attention." I think that more or less is what we expected. I think even more valuable in the survey, though, I asked y'all, what are you most worried about? And what are you most optimistic about? And we got a lot of good responses. So I just want to reflect back to y'all some of the cool stuff that we heard. One was, uh, I'll start with what you're most worried about, and then we can go to what you're most optimistic about, because we'll end on a good note. But a few things that I saw in 1,000 or so responses from you all. Top of the list about what you're most worried about, by far, loss of democracy, authoritarian takeover. This isn't a surprise. This is, disregard for the rule of law, worries about the judicial system, worries about attacks on our freedoms, on the First Amendment and beyond. Look, this is what's driving all of us, I think. This is a major reason why many of us are coming to this work. We all have our particular issues that we care about, but it is the threat to democracy that it brings a lot of indivisible groups to organize themselves. Beyond that, rounding out the top four, threats to Social Security, Medicare, other safety net programs. This was high on the list for many folks. I would say this is roughly number two of the things I've heard from people they're very worried about. That's reasonable given that the reconciliation bill that the Republicans are pushing forward. You should be worried about that. We're worried about that too. We're working to try to fight back against that. Third, which has been just really jarring to see over the last few weeks, we heard a lot about the forced disappearances, the deportations, and state violence. It, this underlines just how much this is not a normal political fight that we're in. We're not just trying to stop the Republicans from cutting Medicaid or just stop the Republicans from instituting bad education policy. They're doing scary stuff. They're taking folks who are organized across the country. They're focusing on the folks who they think are the weakest links, and in some cases they're picking them up and they're taking them out of the country and they're shipping them off to a gulag in a different country. This is really scary stuff, and it's different. It is unique, and it's a big motivator for a lot of folks on this call. If you feel that way, there are a lot of other people who feel that way too, and so hopefully you feel a sense of community with those. And the fourth. Very common concern, and that we've talked about on this call a lot, is this fear about apathy and weak opposition. And that's whether from the public who isn't as engaged or from Democratic leaders who we want to see fight back more. I want to see that too. Uh, Looking at what people are most optimistic about. So your fellow people here who are
Quickly, because we
organizing.
got a
Oh,
little
sorry, we got
time.
a question. There was kind of like a mirror version of what you're most worried about, which I found kind of reassuring. Top of the list, way at the top, was you're most optimistic about the grassroots organizing and people power that's out there, and this sense of community and solidarity that's come from you participating in calls or meetings or protests. And by far, whenever anybody asks me, like, what are you most excited about? What's making you optimistic? That's it. That is what gives me hope. Beyond that, folks are I'd say cautiously optimistic, and I am too, about the courts and the judiciary. We've seen a lot of good injunctions. We've seen a lot of good rulings. Currently, a lot of the court cases are holding the line. That makes me optimistic, and also we can be reasonably concerned about the saber rattling from the Trump administration, even as that currently holds. Um, and last, I would just say, we heard it was hard to categorize because people have different favorites, but there were a lot of different folks who raised up. They were excited about emerging leaders who they were seeing out there. We're organizing on the ground. We're all doing our part where we are. That's giving us a lot of hope. But we're also seeing elected officials who are doing the right thing. We're not fully happy with the Democratic Party or everybody in it. There are folks who are trying to push, but we have our favorite AOC. Of course, Booker after this week, Maxwell Frost, Jasmine Crockett, Chris Murphy, among Jamie Raskin, among others. We heard people are excited. There are Democratic politicians at the local, state, and federal level who get it, who understand this is a crisis and are fighting back. And I feel that way too. And I feel it's such an important part of our work to rally around those leaders and show them that we've got their backs. And it makes me optimistic that we're making progress and that we're actually going to be able to build up a real pro-democracy force to beat these authoritarians and prevent them from doing all the damage they'd like to do. Okay, that was the survey results. I will we'll get into the survey that won't be coming tomorrow, but I'll preview that in a bit. But Leah, should we cover the topics of the day before we get to Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to try to go quickly here because I do really want to get to questions and answers. So please start putting your questions in the chat and start voting for questions because we're going to go through democratically what the most popular questions are. But we're going to cover Musk losing in a big way in Wisconsin. We're going to cover tariffs briefly, and we're going to cover April 5th. So we'll try to get through all these in the next 5 or so minutes, and then we'll get to your questions. So I'll cover, Leah, I'll cover Musk, you'll cover tariffs, and then I'll round out with April 5th. Okay. Musk losing. Musk lost in a big, embarrassing way, everybody. In Wisconsin, in the swingiest of swing states. In the swingiest of swing states, Musk candidate got crushed. Crushed. This was not a close election. This was not a close election. Absolutely creamed. Absolutely destroyed. It is so encouraging to see. So I have two takeaways from this. One is he's a loser who's losing, and he's a loser. I guess that's three takeaways, but two of them overlap. He's a loser. The reports are not just that he lost there, but he's being embarrassed so badly within the White House and in the broader Republican ecosystem that they are now publicly talking about he's going to be booted out of the White House. He's going to say, "Oh, I accomplished my job. I did what I came to do with those bullshit." He is a political liability. He's an anchor around the neck of the Republicans, and they're going to try to say, "Oh, well, we're not associated with him anymore." Too bad. Too bad.
Can't
But
unring that
you
bell.
can't unring that bell. So this election was just a referendum on Musk. It was a referendum on Trump. It was a referendum on Doge. It was a referendum on Project 2025. It was a referendum on billionaires who try to steal and purchase elections. I mean, it was a pretty resounding defeat for that set of folks, and that's really encouraging to hear. And this is my second takeaway, which is we are a pro-democracy movement that does not give up on democracy, right? Right after the election, there were voices on the Democratic side who said, it's over, fascism won, give up, we're not going to have elections anymore. That is not acceptable. I'm not saying that our democracy is safe. I'm not saying that we're going to absolutely hold on to this in perpetuity. I think it's something we've got to fight for. But we do believe, as long as we have the apparatus of democracy to use, we should make use of it. There are going to be more elections going forward. This was just an early one. We're going to have more special elections. We're going to have off-year elections in Virginia and New Jersey in a few months. We're going to have midterms, and we're going to crush them. We're going to crush MAGA every step of the way. Every place that we can win, we're going to win because the public doesn't like what MAGA is doing here. And we're going to make it clear that there are political consequences for what they do. We should feel good. Democracy is winning right now. Leah, do you want to talk about Trump's tariffs?
Yeah, absolutely. So got a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts in on Trump tariff. I mean, I think we're all watching the news and the crazy market reactions. I'll just like offer a very top line thought, which is the great tension at the heart of so much of the Trump administration is like the tension between malevolence and incompetence. Whenever they take an action, we're always sort of debating, are they doing this because they are stupid or are they doing this because they are evil, right? And as with so many things, the answer right now is both, right? Trump has always seen the world in zero-sum terms. There is no win that does not involve someone else losing. There's no collaboration or cooperation that makes everyone better off. There's just this urge to dominate and humiliate and force other people into compliance. This is the attitude towards trade. It's the attitude towards Canada. It's the attitude towards NATO. It's all part of that same core destructive urge. And we've got plenty of evidence that he is steeped in some very crazy right-wing theories about how tariffs are going to ultimately, power his agenda. This is all totally bananas. He seems to believe this stuff. That's the stupid part. Let's also be real. These tariffs are another tool to advance the authoritarian agenda at home. Because the first step right now is you institute these sweeping, disastrous tariffs across the board. The next step is everybody begs for relief, right? And then you grant that relief selectively. So you roll back the tariffs that hurt your billionaire buddies or your red state cronies.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're using, again, this seizure of powers that Congress should have to use tariffs as yet another tool to force industries and push people into compliance with his whims to make them bend the knee. That's how the incompetence and the malevolence work together in a moment like this. It's one of the many things we are going to have to fight back against and that we are coming out to push back against on April 5th. Ezra, take us away.
And we can cover it, just to say, we'll cover more in Q&A. If you got questions about tariffs, we're happy to get into it. I think I will point out Chris Murphy had an excellent thread on Blue Sky
About the
last
second
night
part of that, yeah.
about specifically what Leah is talking about on the second part. We'll link to it. But April 5th. So right, we've got this ridiculous, unpopular, dangerous overreach from Trump. So what do we do about it? Wouldn't it be great if there were some sort of, I don't know, global pushback against this? Wouldn't that be nice if we could pull that together? Good news, everybody. April 5th is going to be enormous. This hands-off single day of protest. We are tracking 1,200 events globally. 1,200. There are more than 100 events in California, 61 across New York, 51 in Washington State, 55 in Michigan, 51 across Ohio, 52 across Texas. Or 42 across Texas. Sorry, we'll get to 52. 17 in Montana. There are 14 hands-off events in Alaska. There's one on each of the Hawaiian Islands. There are two on the Big Island. There are two on the Big Island.
Traffic on the Big Island can be tough.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. We are international, y'all. We're in Ottawa. We're in Guadalajara. We're in Amsterdam. We're in Berlin. We're in London, Lisbon, Lyon. That's in France. And we're growing. We're growing. As I speak, more events are being registered. I've seen the back end. They're being registered and approved and put on this big, giant, incredible map. This will be the single largest day of protest in years, certainly in this Trump administration. Why do we do this? Why are we showing up? Obviously, for folks who have been on this call, we've heard a lot. When are we all going to get in the streets? When's the big day of protest? Well, this is it. We are all showing up in April, this Saturday. This is it. And one main reason we're showing up is because we recognize that the creeping authoritarianism is creeping closer and closer towards all of us. It's going to be easier to protest in April than it is in May, easier in May than in June, easier in June than July. And we need the authoritarians to know just how damn unpopular they are. We need them to know how weak they are, how vulnerable they are. But it's not just focused on the Trump and the Musks and the Republicans in Congress. It's also focused on our side to buck them up. This week, who saw Cory Booker's speech? Let me know in the chat. Did you watch part of Cory Booker's speech? This was incredible. It was like a breath of fresh air. It was just this welcome intervention in the chaos that is Washington and feckless leadership that we've seen. It was a demonstration of what's possible. Cory Booker took to the Senate floor and spoke for 25 hours in defense of democracy. He crushed this previous record held by this asshole Southern segregationist, and who at the time, what he was filibustering civil rights at the time. So there's beautiful poetry in this action. But it was this incredible moment. And you could say, oh, it's just a stunt, whatever. Yeah, it was a stunt that broke through.
Yeah.
It was a stunt that broke through and got people's attention and got people to focus on what was at stake. It was the kind of leadership we need. It was creative. It was entrepreneurial. It recognized the moment. Why did Booker do it? Why did he do it? Well, he told us why. He literally told us why in the speech. And I'm going to quote directly from the speech. Quote, our constituents are asking us to acknowledge this is not normal, that this is a crisis. So I am going to stand here until I no longer can. I'm going to speak up. Who is he talking about when he says his constituents asked him to do it? Well, the week before this filibuster, he met with I on J, Indivisible One New Jersey, the statewide coordinating group for all the indivisible groups in New Jersey, who asked him directly to do this, who asked him to stand up and do more and acknowledge it was a crisis. The message here is if we want our leaders to lead, we got to ask them to lead. We've got to demonstrate that we're organizing and we've got to show them there is demand for it and support for it. Why do we have 1,200 events globally this Saturday? Yes, it's to strike fear in the hearts of the authoritarians who want to come after us, but it's also to convince the Schumers of the world that they need to be more like the Bookers of the world, that we actually need leaders standing up and fighting for us. So I got a poll. I think it's an easy poll. I want to put it up. Before we get to Q&A, then we'll get to Q&A. One, I want you to answer this question. Are you showing up on Saturday for a hands-off protest wherever you are? And once you fill out this poll and while we wait for the results to come in, tell me in the chat what's on your sign. What is on the sign that you were making for this protest? No kings. I love no kings.
Love no kings. Great slogan.
Hands off. Hands off our bodies, hands off our schools, hands off our democracy, hands off our libraries. Yes?
Protect trans kids.
Protect trans kids.
Love thy neighbor.
The Third Reich.
Billionaires are gross. Hands off Noah.
The Ukraine flag. Resist. Elbows up. Indeed. Hands off my body. No mandate. Indeed. You're carrying a U.S. flag. Beautiful. Yes to snap, no to kings.
It's so bad, even introverts are here. I love that. As an introvert, I'm with you.
We love it.
All
Putin's
right.
puppet. Money
Hands
monster
off our
teams up.
undocumented neighbors.
Indeed. We the people have power. Let's see. Can we show the results? Is that possible? I cannot vote as a panelist.
All right, y'all.
We got 89%. You're showing up. No, but you're showing support in another way. Great. Maybe I'm still deciding. Okay, if you're in the maybe category, we got 89 of you in the maybe category, 3%. Please check it out. Go to handsoff2025.com. You can click a map. You can see where the events are. And if you're like, oh, I've got to drive for 30 minutes, an hour to get to the nearest one. That's okay. Start your own.
No,
register your own.
You don't, because there's one, I guarantee you at this point, there is one within 30 minutes of you.
That's probably that. Maybe if you're just really in the hinterland, someone. Yeah, there's probably one very close to where you are.
It's there.
Okay, good point, Leah. Okay, with all that said, it's great to be here organized with you. Let's get to your questions. We're going to start with questions that are coming in live. So I'm just going to open that up. Reminder, you can vote. And we're going to start with the very top question coming from Heather with about 500 votes. Thoughts on the Insurrection Act being invoked on or before April 20th as outlined on the White House website. We've gotten some incoming on this too, Heather.
Do you want to take that one?
Sure. So here's what I would say. I have no idea what this White House is going to do. I think they raise a lot of things and then they back off and they shoot from the hip and then it's not real. Sometimes what they say is going to become reality. Here's what I know. This White House has been talking about coming after peaceful protesters for a very long time. This White House is very antagonistic towards the idea of democracy, towards the idea of peaceful, nonviolent resistance. They very much would like to dissuade people from organizing. And authoritarians do this. This is part of the playbook. They want to intimidate. They want to convince you that you're alone. They want to convince you that you're powerless. They want you to convince you that organizing isn't something that you should be doing right now, that you should lay low and that you should avoid their ire. This is why you see institution after institution cowering and falling. You see this from universities, you see this from law firms, you see this from business, you see this from media. This isn't an accident. Folks out there in positions of power running institutions are seeing that this administration is dangerous and might come after them. And so, to avoid being one of the first that gets targeted, they're cowering, they're complying, they're acquiescing ahead of time. When the White House rattles its sabers and says, well, we might be invoking the Insurrection Act, we might be coming after peaceful protesters, what they're trying to do is scare you off of organizing.
Yep.
And the only thing, and look, we've been talking to Timothy Snyder, or we've been reading Heather Cox Richardson, or you've been watching Rachel Maddow, or have you been paying attention to any of the experts in authoritarianism? What you know is the only solution to this is to link arms and to treat an attack on one like an attack on all, and to organize where you are and to be as big as possible to show them, no, we're not scared. We're not going to be intimidated. And I'm not going to say that doesn't involve risk. I'm not going to say that doesn't involve courage. It does. I mean, that is the reality we're facing. And also, the safest we're going to be is if more and more of us come out and organize together.
I'm gonna just take it a slightly different direction on that point around kind of elite institutions collapsing. I think right now, if you look at kind of the justification that a Paul Weiss is putting out or that a Columbia University is putting out for compliance with the administration, it's pretty clear. They're sort of saying they're kind of a framework is like, this is going to be around for a while. We got to do the things that are necessary to exist under this regime. And what we need to do collectively is flip that calculation and say, we're big, we're organizing, we are going to win. There will come a day, whether it, in 4 years, there will come a day when this regime will leave and democracy will reassert itself. And
Mm.
who will you be then, right? Who will you be then,
Yep,
Columbia
yep.
University, because you screwed over your students? Who will you be then, Paul Weiss, because you abandoned your clients and you abandoned the basic principles? And flip it into a question of what does the future look like and which side do you want to be on then?
Oh, I love that, Leah. I'm going to use that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next
Should have
top.
wanted to come after Columbia University on that one.
Indeed. Next top question from Matthew with about 400 votes. I loved Cory Booker's speech and feel like it gave us some momentum and pulled us out of some of the despair we have been feeling. Here, here. What are some specific strategies we can deploy to keep the momentum going? Obviously, we have April 5th protest this weekend, but what other strategies can or should group organizers employ?
A good question. And the answer has got to be fundamentally, we're going to come up with ideas. We're going to talk about what comes after April 5th. But I think one of the big lessons we should take from the Cory Booker action is we need to just encourage people to be creative and experiment, right? Like we can't outline, every individual action that every individual senator should take. We can create the conditions in which they know that creativity and courage and eloquence and like standing up and doing something different will be rewarded and they will come up with the actions at that point. And so I think it's good that Cory Booker's getting a ton of support and love for what he did. It's good that we're going to all be together on April 5th, that we will take inspiration from each other, that we will be in community together. Out of that, I am confident 100 new, a bunch of new actions will be dreamed up. But we've just got to continue that cycle of testing things and creativity really to get there.
And Leah, you're touching on something here, which is like there's stuff we can do as organizers, all of us as organizers on the ground and individual activists, and then there's stuff elected officials can do. And I think the cool thing that we saw from Cory Booker is how did we get there? We all organized wherever we were. We created this sense of people are demanding leadership. We didn't say, Cory Booker, go give a 25-hour speech on the floor and break Strom Thurmond's record. We said, lead, do something to demonstrate that you're taking this seriously. And Cory Booker's a smart guy. And he figured out some way to take advantage of the moment. We created the opportunity. When I think of the specific things that we can do, we've got April 5th. What we know is after, for instance, the Women's March in 2017, a mass mobilization in the first Trump term, a lot of new indivisible groups and new activists figured out how to organize on the bus rides back. They said, wow, we just did this incredible action together. What's next? And the answer was, oh, we organize locally. We build up our groups locally. We focus on our local officials. That's what we do next. Everybody on this call is hyper engaged. You were spending your Thursday afternoon talking about how you save democracy. There are going to be a lot of people on April 5th who are not as hyper engaged on you. Welcome them in. Figure out a way to then incorporate them into your group. Figure out a way to tap into their skill sets, technical, organizational, communications, whatever it may be that they can do. Bring them in and help them build up your group. And then direct that towards actual impactful activities. And I'll give you a couple. We are headed in shortly after April 5th, the next big congressional recess, when members of Congress should be home and you should be able to get in touch with them. And if you can't get in touch with them, you can put pressure on them. We've played this game already twice this year. Take advantage of that. We can get into details after April 5th on exactly how to take advantage of that, but that's an immediate opportunity coming up. Beyond that, we've got May Day.
Yeah.
I would expect massive cross movement organizing around May Day. No individual day of protest is going to save democracy. What we are doing is working a muscle. We are building a muscle that makes us more and more powerful and more able to push back against the authoritarian onslaught. So we should constantly be asking this question, Matthew. I think it's a good one. What's next? How are we building further? How do we get creative? What's the next tactic? And we should be creating the conditions for elected officials to take advantage of that and lead like Cory Booker did. Let's go to, there were a lot of questions that came in ahead of time. So I'll come back to the questions coming in live. We got some questions on April 5th ahead of time. Some basic ones that Leah, I think we can cover pretty quickly. Simona from California asked, where do I get the info packet? What can I, this is about April 5th. What can I do to help? I'm a first-time protester. Are protests safe for kids?
Let's take reverse order. Yes, total. We want these protests to be family friendly. They're going to be peaceful. They're going to be joyful. A lot of them are going to have music, entertainment. This is supposed to be a space where, you know, you bring your kids, you bring your dogs. I mean, if your dogs are cool, but you know, we're going to be
Your
in
ferrets,
community
your
together.
cats.
And so yeah, don't bring your ferret.
Oh, I love ferrets.
Yeah, they're not good for rallies. Anyways, okay, so yes, so first time protesters, yes, very welcome. What can I do to help? I would encourage you, if you want to help, to reach out to your local event. A lot of times they will need some extra volunteers. You know, they need somebody to man a stand or to help, you know, with stage access or whatever. So reach out and see if they could use some extra hands. And where do I get the info packet? We will put the link in the chat so that you can find your event and so that you can find all of the toolkits and info that we've got.
Excellent. A question from Alta. There's a lot of love for ferrets in the chat, I will note. Question from,
Is there?
question from Melisande in Virginia. Will the April 5th action just be in DC or nationwide? I will be in Wyoming, so anything planned for Wyoming? Oh,
We got
yes.
good news for you.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, there are multiple events across Wyoming. I think there were like 5 or 6 the last time I
No,
checked.
I think
There's
it was
more.
near a dozen.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yes. Wherever you are in Wyoming, you will be able to find an event.
Wyoming's
And
pretty
wherever
big.
you are in the country, well, I mean, you know, with a drive that's normal for Wyoming, wherever you are in the country, we believe you're going to be able to find an event.
Yeah. And just to emphasize, you can come to DC. It's going to be big. It'll be a giant protest. You can come to New York. That'll be big. There will be big protests in the city centers. But as somebody who worked for a member of Congress, who represent 13 counties, many of them rural and some more urban, you know, we paid attention to protests, obviously, that were happening in the big city center, but it was really jarring to see people organize in the more rural, remote parts of the district because it sent a message that this was happening everywhere. So if you're in Wyoming, by all means, go to the Wyoming protest. Go to the, if you're in a small town and there's a hands-off event there, or you can drive for a couple hours and go to the city, like feel free to do what makes sense for you, but don't feel bad about going to your local protest. That's great. I want to see protests in rural areas, in red areas, in remote areas. That's good. We want to send a signal that we're everywhere because we are. Why don't we bounce back to some questions that are coming in live, and we'll keep on going back and forth. A question from Ellen that's come in. In the event Indivisible is silenced due to becoming being labeled as a quote unquote terrorist organization, bullshit claims that some people are making about a peaceful nonviolent movement, which is what we are. But in the event, how do all of us remain connected so nationwide resistance isn't fragmented? Great question, Ellen. I mean, it's a serious question, and it's a good one to be asking.
I mean, my answer, quite honestly, is to Ezra's point about this being bullshit, is we're not going to be silenced. We are here. We organize in the open. We're proud of what we do. We organize a peaceful, nonviolent movement full of regular people all over the country who want to support each other and stand in community and fight for our values and our neighbors. And we're going to be right here. We're gonna keep doing what we are doing. We know that there are a lot of threats coming in. We know that there are, or sort of that the right wing ecosystem loves to kind of throw around these threats. Um, we believe the best thing to do is to continue to organize in the open and be unafraid, and that's what we're doing. So,
And if, can I just say, look, if Leah and I are like, we receive a fair amount of incoming from Elon Musk directly and from other right-wing wackadoodles who, are saber rattling at us personally. Here's what I say. They can come after us. They can illegitimately try to take us down. And if they do, there are going to be 1,000 more that stand up. That is what's going to happen. We are not the leaders of this movement. We are helping and co-leading with thousands of leaders all across the
that is
country.
exactly right.
My only request is if Elon Musk or one of their goons comes after us, you use that. If we're not here as a rallying cry, use that to organize other people, use that to bring other people in. That is my only request from folks on this call and folks in this movement, because it's going to be bullshit if they do it, but it's not going to succeed either. Okay. Thank you for that question, Ellen. Shanice, oh, and thank you for all the emojis. Shanice asks, I'm worried about the deportations, as are we, that are currently being done in violation of due process, cruel and unusual punishment, in addition to attacks on free speech, bodily autonomy, and Republicans' explicit calls for white supremacist male rule. What can we do to stop these attacks on our basic rights, specifically not just broadly against Trump and Musk? Price/egg tariffs, individual economic concerns arguments don't solve it. Agreed. We won't be okay even if eggs were cheap. Shanice, well
Yes, we're
said.
with you.
Well said.
With yeah, that is absolutely right. And I think one of the challenges that I think we have seen, frankly, from a lot of Democratic leadership has been this belief that the only thing they should talk about, and this is like kind of a misreading of 2024, this belief that the only thing you could possibly talk about during this period is cost of living, because that was such a central part of 2024. I want to be really clear. We need an economic story. We need an economic pitch. It is not a good or acceptable thing if you are the people, like the heads of the opposition, the popular opposition for democracy, to refuse to call out and identify what is happening here, which is an alliance of billionaires are sabotaging our government and running rampant over our basic civil and human rights. You can't decline to identify that. You can't decline to say we're in a constitutional crisis. You can't decline to defend people who are being detained, kidnapped, sent to gulags. You can't simply step away from that stuff and say, "Oh, I'm only going to talk about eggs and that's going to be the path back." That is a misread politically, and it is a moral failure. So I'm with you. Part of the reason why we talk about hands off as the message for April 5th is because we want to bring the story of what is happening economically and the story of what is happening to our democracy together, right? We want people to understand that this is the assault on our basic services, on service, the things that we depend on to live healthy and safe and dignified lives in this country, is one and the same with the assault on our Constitution, the assault on integration, the assault on basic functions of democracy, right? It's all the same story. It's a set of billionaires who have come together to ransack the things we care about for their own personal benefit. And because they know it is unpopular, they have to sabotage democracy so that they can keep getting away with it. That is the story that we are telling together. And so 100% agree with you.
Leah, that you're just gonna let a love for that comment. Like we'll clip that. We'll clip that and send it around. That was a great answer. Um, uh, Debbie from Maryland asks, so I'm sorry, I'm just gonna, a couple more questions that came in ahead of time from April 5th, about April 5th. Debbie from Maryland asks, where should our number one focus be on April 5th? I find it hard to focus on things other than hands off our democracy. I would just say quickly, we're all going to come to this work for different reasons. We're all going to organize for different reasons. Maybe we're concerned about the deportations. Maybe we're concerned about the attacks on Social Security. Maybe we're concerned about the attacks on the Department of Education. That's okay. We need a cross-cultural, broadly cross-ideological movement that is here to say no to all of this. That's the benefit of a hands-off frame. We can all say no for a different reason, but we're all saying no together. So you don't need to feel a drive to all focus on this is the attack that we're focusing on, we can say no to all of Project 2025 and be motivated by different aspects of it. Leah, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean I would agree. I think look, the big story that we want people to take out of this fundamentally is that they have no mandate for what they're doing.
That's right.
They have no
Mhm.
mandate for the attacks on our Constitution. They have no mandate for the attacks on Medicaid and Social Security. They have no mandate for dismantling federal government agencies that we depend on to lead good lives in this country. They have no mandate for what they are doing across the board. And that is the point that we are pushing together by coming out and showing up in large numbers. And so yes, bring the sign that motivates you. But what we are all coming together to do is to push back on the idea that they should be able to get away with any of this.
Great. Okay, let's go to the questions that are coming in live. Brittany's got the next most voted question, so please keep on submitting and voting with about 300 votes. Do we have a plan to draw attention to the signal trap OPSEC breaches? I've been asking my reps to impeach everyone involved and shine a light on this. This seems like a huge area of vulnerability for the administration.
Uh, so yes, we've got some ongoing asks for folks to call your members to try to keep pushing on this. There's going to be a number aware there are a number of different investigations that folks have announced that they're going to be rolling out into this. Frankly, as we get more information, it seems pretty clear that this was not an I mean, and honestly, you can figure this out from just the context, but it's very clear that this was not an isolated signal chat that they set up to talk about just this specific thing. It's pretty clear that they are using Signal for the entire national security bureaucracy to communicate about a bunch of obviously sensitive and classified crises and issues around the world in order to evade their obligations around federal record maintenance and in order to evade any kind of oversight. So this is an enormous scandal. It is the kind of thing that in any normal administration, everyone involved would be fired and or being prosecuted for right now. We absolutely should keep pushing it. So fully agree, and I think it's a matter of just continuing to keep the heat on it and continue to make sure our electeds hear about it.
Do y'all remember when Obama wore a suit that was the wrong color and Republicans talked
The
about it for
tan
like,
suit crisis.
yeah, tan suit for like, they talked about it for like 2 weeks. I mean, they were still talking about it months later. Like it would come up as an example of his violating decorum. And I do think Democrats have a real problem when like we're in a different universe than that. I mean, endangering national security because you're so sloppy. Um, and, and we talk about it for a day and then we move on. It's like we shy away from repetition. We got to recognize the vast majority of people are not paying attention the vast majority of the time. And I do think this hits on a real problem with some form of Democratic leadership right now. Like a guy like Chuck Schumer, who is very smart, built his political career in a previous generation of the media ecosystem. The way he engages and the way some other Democrats engage is thinking, well, we'll look at what the top polling question is, and then we'll just talk about that, and we'll talk about it to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then people will learn about it. And that's just not how it works anymore. It really isn't. We live in a media ecosystem that depends on conflict, that depends on sharp clips, that depends on you getting out there in different areas and meeting people where they are outside of the New York Times or even an MSNBC or a CNN. It means going to influencers and social media and to non-political podcasts and news sources. And if you don't have the mentality of we've got to win an issue, let's go, go, go here, and you're waiting for the other side to sink itself, or you're hoping that they're covered fairly, where you'll get one quote from the Republicans and one quote from the Democrats, and people will be informed, you're gonna lose. And the right wing understands that. The right wing really understands that. They are cleaning our clock. They're wiping the floor with us when it comes to engagement on social media and with influencers and with podcasts, because they're playing an entirely different game. They understand how to drive their message, and we're not doing that as much. I think it's a real gap on our side, and it's one of the real gaps on leadership at a national level that we need to fix if we're going to effectively combat these authoritarians. Speaking of this, actually, this ties into a question that came in ahead of time from Ellen from Minnesota. Uh, uh, what should we be asking of our Democratic senators in light of Booker's marathon speech? More of the same, something else.
Yeah. So this is my personal jam. I don't think that we should be dictating every individual tactic at this point. I think Booker's speech was great. you can't just do the same thing over and over again. You're going to get diminishing returns pretty fast. And so, what we're going to try to do is encourage people to be creative, recognizing that we're not going to be in the meeting where somebody says, oh, hey, by the way, this cabinet member is coming to that thing. Maybe we should stage this action at that point. Like, we're not going to have that inside information. We're not going to be able to like orchestrate a campaign to say, do this creative, entrepreneurial, opportunistic thing exactly the way we say it. What we need to do is tell people we want more of that, right? We want you to get creative. We want you to make the plan. You are the leaders. You got to come up with ideas. You got to think about how do you use your podiums? How do you use your like your position to drive home this story of fighting back and to drive home the story of the harm and what is at stake here. And we will be behind you and reward you and support you as you do.
That's right. I I will say some Democrats are getting that message, as
Yeah,
we saw some from
I think
Booker.
people
Like we
are.
can create the conditions. When there are key votes where we can organize and use leverage, we'll let you know.
Yeah,
And
right,
like an example
right.
of that is the funding, the CR funding bill. We identified that as the leverage point
Right.
and we organized around it. It's why it was so disappointing that Schumer and a few others gave up their leverage. But there will be occasional opportunities. So if you're following Indivisible, trust me, we are constantly on the lookout for real asks, ways that we can push Democratic leaders to lean into this fight.
That's right. That's right. And I think people are getting the message. There was a Politico article immediately after Booker's speech that was kind of like Democrats are inspired and they're looking for new things to do. And we were, I would say, like, yeah, yeah, y'all. Like, okay, whatever, however it takes for you to get the message. Let's go.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to like welcome them when they do.
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
Booker hasn't voted the right way for the last 3 months. Okay, he is here now. He's leading now. I want him to get positive feedback now.
That's right.
Hakeem Jeffries, we were plenty critical of him for the first few months of the year. He whipped his caucus for the funding bill. Great. Hakeem's leading. Great. We will cheerlead you on. My goal is not to just give bad quotes about Democrats for the next several months. No, we want a unified opposition, which means when people are ready to join the fight, welcome them in. Actually, this relates to Roger's question, also from Minnesota. How to reconcile the need for new proactive Democratic leadership in Congress with the need for Democratic caucus unity? That is the challenge. That really is the challenge. Leah, how do you balance these two things? Because we do want unity, but also we're being let down by some of our leaders.
Yeah. Well, I would pull out like kind of what's the public conversation with constituents and what's our job and what's their job, right? Because fundamentally, like the way you get to different leadership in the Senate or is senators make some decisions about whether they need new leadership together, right? What we do is we create the conditions in which Democrats understand what's expected of them. And that is what we have collectively been doing with our pushback, with our town halls, with our calls. The number of electeds who come to us and they say, like, what do I need to do to get my constituents to understand that I'm with them right now? And we talk to them about, here's be creative, have town halls, be accessible, be out there, experiment with new media, try ways of getting your message out, try, creative stunts, that kind of action. Those are the things that we can push collectively right now that help to shift the environment in which there is a more functional leadership.
You know the thing that pisses me off the most, though? Can I just say?
Where are we going with
I'm
this?
sorry. This rankles me. Uh, what we've heard for the first several months of the year from many Democratic leaders, people who are following the James Carville strategy of roll over and play dead, we heard them say, "We're in the minority. What do you want us to do? We're powerless. We can't do anything." And it was so frustrating because now that we have built up all of this pressure, suddenly they are discovering things they can do.
Yeah.
I love that Cory Booker gave a 25-hour speech this week. Also, any senator, any of the 47 Democrats could have given a 25-hour speech in January or February or March. We have
It's
one.
possible only Cory Booker could
Actually,
have given
Cory
that
Booker's there.
actually,
They
just to
maybe
be
could have given a
honest.
10-hour speech, but
Yeah. So
still, we could have seen this kind of action any time before. Any Democratic senator could have prevented or at least raised attention against the Laken Riley bad immigration bill that they jammed through. Any senator could start putting holds on nominees, like Brian Schatz did it just for State Department nominees. What about holds on Treasury nominees? What about holds on Department of Education nominees? What about Commerce nominees? You can put holds on anything. As Adam Schiff showed us, the DC attorney just put a hold on it. Why now? What about in March? What about in February and January? I welcome this action now, but don't let Any elected official tell you, I'm powerless. Any elected official who tells you they're powerless, they should find a new job. Full stop. They are in the wrong line of work. We are facing an authoritarian attacking our rights. If you are in a position of power, I don't care if you're a dog catcher or a U.S. senator, there's something you can do. And if you're telling your constituents you're powerless, go become a lobbyist. Go sell out now. Let somebody else take up the mantle. Sorry, that we'll get off my high horse now. Let's go to some Democratic questions that came in. I think we answered Carol questions because this is about this threat of action from the White House. So I'm going to say we answered that. Let's go to the next one from Valerie. Let's see. Oh, this is a good question. We've
Yeah.
seen this too. Valerie asks, I've run across social media posts by Black people urging their fellow Black Americans to stay home on April 5th because they believe the presence will increase the likelihood of police violence or martial law, and because some of them feel that this is white people's fight. What is your perspective on that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot here. So I think I'll start by just saying I do think that it is incumbent on us white people to show up right now,
Hmm.
right? Black folks have been the backbone of social movements and the fight for justice and democracy in this country for generations and generations. And this is a moment when it is, the reality of white Christian nationalism is at the fore, and those of us white people who do not want to be defined by that, who say not and want to say not in our names, we have to show up 100%. I also think, there's a lot here around the depth of pain and betrayal that folks feel around 2024, around the position Kamala Harris was put in, around the role of racism and sexism in this election, and around, the burden, the disproportionate burden that Black folks have borne for a very long time and the threats that they face. And I would say, first of all, Valerie, I don't know your race, but one, I would recognize that this is kind of an intra Black community conversation first, right? So do not be the white person who shows up in that conversation is like, here's what I think you should do. Please don't do that. So, and two, I think that we should just recognize that different folks are going to organize in different ways, are going to approach this moment in different ways. Some folks are going to say, I'm going to step back for some time,
Hmm.
and that's okay. And we got to just say, we're going to do what we can do right now. And we're here. We want to work with you. We want to support you. When you're ready or what you want to do, we're here too. And we just got to figure out how to continue to build together in a way that is respectful and that is thoughtful and that is ultimately about being part of a broader multiracial progressive movement.
Thomas says a very wise and thoughtful response, Leah. Um, Next question from Michelle. How can we slash should we do a better job welcoming disenfranchised conservatives and moderates into the movement? There's a lot of vitriol towards the middle slash right, and rightly so, but don't we need them to get on board? Also love this question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess what I would say is I think not everyone has to do everything. Some people are going to be the welcome committee, and some people are not going to be the welcome committee. And different organizations or spaces might be the right kind of home and space for people, right? We've been trying to be really clear that during this moment, we want to pull anybody who will come with us. And that's not necessarily like that we think that we're going to reach out to hard right MAGA folks. We are very realistic that we are not going to be persuading the hard right MAGA folks. But we do have an analysis that we lost some set of folks in 2024 who either went for Trump or who were just generally disenchanted with both parties. And because they were frustrated by the economy, because they were frustrated by the cost of living crisis, because they didn't feel like they were being heard or represented by the political system, and they were willing to roll the dice on an obviously unacceptable person because wanted that more change more than the status quo. Those are folks that we want to pull back in with
That's right.
us. Some of them are people who are already watching what is happening and saying, "Oh, I did not sign up for that." And like we can have a long conversation about what exactly did you think you were signing up for, but right now I want to pull those folks in and say, "Okay, let's be a coalition together. Let's be that broad popular front for democracy." Um, Again, like some people are going to be the welcoming committee. And if you are someone who can do those kinds of conversations, who can have outreach, who can do, values-based conversations with people who are going to come in a different place than you, great. If you're not that person, that's okay too. Just try not to get into Facebook arguments with each other.
Uh, that is right. Okay. Daphne says, I get annoyed when elected Dems keep saying, wait for the midterms. That's when we can really make a difference. I know they are important. These are important in normal times, but nothing that's happening right now is normal. I feel like by midterms, our country may be completely lost to us. What is your answer to this? Can I just validate that reaction, Daphne? It is one of the most frustrating responses we get. I'd put it right below I'm powerless. So Democrats who say, I'm powerless, what do you want me to do? That's very frustrating. And then Democrats who say, great, go vote. And you look around, and you're like, it's April of an off year. Go vote where? They're, they're instituting, he's attacking the global economy. He's disappearing legal residents. He's coming after our Social Security and Medicaid. Go vote is your answer. You see historic levels of anti-Musk, anti-Trump energy organizing the streets, and your answer to that energy is don't do anything for 18 months, but in 18 months, go vote. It is it is so frustrating. There are some electeds who see this historic level of energy out there and they say, what an opportunity. We can harness that. We can scare off the Republicans from doing some of the worst things. We can push back against what Trump is doing. We can bring more people to our side. And then there are some that see this energy and say, "Oh no, I can't control that. That's a threat to me. So I'm going to tell it to relax and not show up." Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. There is work you can be doing right now. We are doing that. We are doing that. Some of it's at the national level. A lot of what we talk about on these calls is there's a big bill coming up or there's a big special election coming up and we're all coming together. A lot of it's going to be at the local level, though. It's up to you to identify where do you have leverage? Where is your power? We'll do our best to support, but this isn't a movement led by Leah and Ezra. It's led by thousands of local leaders who are figuring out where can I do good right now in this moment. Some of it's going to be electoral, some of it's going to be advocacy, some of it's going to be community, mutual aid, supporting folks who are under threat. But there is work that you can do in this moment. And anybody that tells you to wait 18 months isn't serious about this being a crisis that needs to be confronted now. Anything else?
You got it.
Okay. I'm noting we have 2 more minutes left, so I just want to note we have always followed up with a survey the next day. There's not going to be a survey tomorrow. What I'm going to ask you instead is to make a sign and to make a plan and to go out on April 5th. So the follow-up email to this is going to include the recording and the transcript and a lot of materials, but it's going to ask you to commit to doing this work on Saturday. And then we'll all come together again next week. But I just wanted to say that so people aren't surprised, and we'll answer a few more questions before closing out. So Patricia has the next top question. Are you hearing anything about counter protests on Saturday? A little bit, a smattering of it. I saw somebody outside of Dallas, a constable outside of Dallas, was posting that there was a hands-off event and they were going to put together a counter protest. But frankly, actually, the organized opposition has been not super organized at the ground level. There's been a little bit of it. Leah, what have you seen?
Well, so what I would say there is, we're aware of the possibility. There is an excellent hour-long training that we and some of our partners did last night on de-escalation at these events,
yeah.
on security and safety, maintaining nonviolent discipline. We're all super clear. We want these to be, again, peaceful, family-friendly, fun, and joyful events. And we're making sure that our folks across the country have that guidance and have the tools to de-escalate if necessary. I think we can link it. So if you want to find that training, or if at a minimum, we'll definitely send it out in the follow-up email. But yeah, so we want to make sure that folks have the tools they need in the event of that. And also, to Ezra's point, we are not hearing a ton of organized efforts now.
I want to answer this question because it's specifically on tariffs, and I think it's a good tactical question. Christina asks how to work around Mike Johnson's the rest of the year is one day, so we can get the House to declare a not emergency re-tariff. So basically, can I just demystify, disentangle this a little bit? Yeah. Trump has no constitutional power to independently institute tariffs. The power that he has is given to him by Congress, and Congress can take it away. So there's going to be an attempt to say, well, Trump is doing this and it's on him. Not true. If Republicans woke up tomorrow and said, hey, we don't like this because our constituents are angry, they could stop it with Democrats. And I guarantee you the Democrats in Congress would vote to stop it. So they're pulling some weird procedural maneuvers to avoid being pushed on this, but every Republican owns this. Mike Johnson sent his members home this week to avoid having to respond. They're not going home to talk to their constituents. They're just not taking votes. They're going and talking to donors. They should be shamed for this. Trump is trying to crash the the national and world economy, and Mike Johnson just sent everybody else out to have a play date. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. We should be calling on Mike Johnson to in emergency bring everybody back, hold a vote, and if you don't hold a vote, it's on you. It is on you. And when Republicans refuse to vote for it, it's on them. They need to own the consequences of Trump and Musk and Doge and Project 2025. And that's for every vulnerable member up next year, and it's for everybody else as well. We could be looking at a massive landslide wave against Republicans who are assisting in it, but they have to own it. They really have to own it. So it's up to us to make clear who is responsible for this. And so among the things you should be talking about at these 1,200 events globally is how Republicans are standing by and allowing this to happen. Leah, I feel like we got a lot more here. We'll do two more and then we're going to close out. Sorry, we always have so many and I would like to get more, but we'll try to get through Lisa and Molly's and then we'll close out. Okay, the time is short, says Lisa, and we should build on the success of April 5th. Is there a plan following April 5th hands-off rally? We so appreciate you and all the Indivisible chapters. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so like Ezra said, after April 5th, we're rolling right into a congressional recess, and we gotta build on that energy. We got to pull in some of those folks who maybe this was the first rally they've been to some kind of engaging activity and enter something that is around, again, pushing with our members of Congress. This is the period in which we expect them to start trying to move the Trump tax giveaway in earnest. And so we're going to need to be out there fighting back. Like I said, there's also May Day coming up. So we're going to be throwing in with labor unions, with immigrant rights groups, making sure that that's a big moment as well. I'm just going to double answer the questions and say do you have suggestions or for resources on how to ensure our friends and family in the fight for democracy? I don't know how to get them to join me. Think about like low barriers to entry asks. Think about things that are fun. Think about things that involve community. Think about things that don't necessarily ask people to like test a new skill the first time they show up, and just keep asking. Like some people aren't going to be ready this month. That's okay. They might be ready next month.
I'm going to answer that question in a sec, but I'm just going to go to Stacy's question. Is there a reason independent news like Brian Tyler Cohen or Midas Touch don't talk about April 5th hands-off protests? We're doing as much outreach as we can to these groups, but here's what I would recommend. Tell them, hey, post about April 5th. Like, really, you can tell them these are folks who are generally aligned and want to highlight these things. Leah and I and others from Indivisible are doing outreach, but you can do it too. I talked to a Midas Touch podcast just yesterday. I'm talking to the Contrarian Jen Rubin tomorrow. We're trying to advertise this as much as possible. So, but we need your help.
Yeah.
You can do this and just post it to them, send it to them, email it to them, whatever it is. Try to elevate it to them so they understand it's happening, it's worth covering. But to Molly's question here, the advice that rings in my ear about how do you pull more people in the movement came from Marshall Gans back in early 2017. For folks who don't know Marshall, he's this like organizing genius. He was Cesar Chavez's organizing director. He was the mastermind behind Barack Obama's field campaign in 2008, which was really broke new ground and was wildly successful. But we were talking with Marshall soon after the original Indivisible guide was launched, and we were seeing a lot of energy. And I remember him saying, he's like, "Well, Ezra, it's really cool that your guide's going viral, and there are a few folks reading it. But here's the thing about viral energy: the energy comes, and if you don't harness it, if you don't direct it, if you don't plug those folks into leadership at the local level, it'll dissipate. It'll be gone. So the challenge for us in a moment like April 5th." Is we have this huge opportunity because new people who have not been paying attention before are suddenly going to be joining. They're suddenly going to be trying to figure out, oh, wow, this is the thing to participate in. And the bad scenario from this is one in which we get millions of people participating around the globe. And those millions of people participate on April 5th, and then they go back to doing what they were doing afterwards on April 6th. We don't want that. Wherever you can, if you are out in the world at these protests, if you are meeting people, you should be an ambassador for your local Indivisible group or whatever group that you're part of. You should be meeting and organizing with these people in your community, and you should be pulling them in. You want them to take on some form of leadership. You want to tap in to their own skill set, their creativity, their entrepreneurialism. You want to make them feel like they are part of a community so that they keep coming back. We should all be ambassadors for democracy on April 5th. Yes, we're showing up to protest. We're showing up to meet new people and pull them in to a persistent, sustained protest against authoritarianism as well. This is the challenge. This is the challenge and the opportunity. So I hope we meet it. So my main advice to Molly and folks who are grappling with this is take advantage of this moment. Saturday is going to be cool. And you know what? A lot of new people participate in cool stuff. That's great. Let's build more cool stuff with them together.
That's a good moment to
Okay, we
wrap up
can we
on.
can wrap on
Let
cool
everyone
stuff.
go.
We can
Yeah.
wrap on cool stuff.
Okay.
Okay, I will see y'all out on Saturday. Please send pictures. Please let us know how it's going. Please tell us what we should be building for next. And in a week at 3 p.m. on Thursday Eastern Time, we will be back here with you for What's the Plan and more Q&A. Love building this movement with y'all. Thanks for coming out.